Director Doctor, you've been very involved and very proactive in this for a long time, and involved in far more hearings than I'm sure you'd like to be, but kind of give us an update of where you're at in terms of these points that I've raised. I know you're being proactive.
So when it comes to performance metrics, I mean, there's a lot of different performance metrics you can look at when you talk about bridges. We have a list of distressed bridges. We want to reduce the number of distressed bridges we have. We have a bridge health index, but we have a laundry list of needs on those bridges. There's a lot of different ways that we can represent as far as any investment we make as to what could be accomplished, and we're willing to drill down to any level of detail that the legislature would want us to do. The easiest example is on the pavement. We did talk about 10%. We're currently at 16 to 17% distressed pavement. And with the investment that was identified by the governor's proposal, we proposed to get down to 10% distressed. I have much greater level of detail as far as the condition of our pavement by class of road, class 1, class 2, class 3, and I know every bit of that road, whether or not it's in good, fair, or poor. And I'm willing to identify any level of detail as far as targets and performance metrics goes for all those classes and where we should be able to come out as far as good, fair, and poor, depending on the level of investment we make. We identified a high-level performance metric to get down to 10% distressed. I'm willing to drill down and provide any level of detail as far as performance metrics goes, both on the bridge side, but on the pavement side, the culvert side, any of the important assets that we've identified as far as classes. We can get to any level of detail you'd like.
Sure. Okay. Well, and we'll have a continuing dialogue, I'm sure, on that. Do we have the state auditor out there in the audience? Would you please come forward and just auditor, could you hang around too? Because you might want to respond to something that they have to say. Could you allow the gentleman to be seated there at the table? Please state your name, sir.
Good morning, Vice Chair, Senator Pavley. My name is Jordan Wright. I'm with the State Auditor's Office. I'm happy to be here to present some of the results of a recent audit that we performed of Caltrans maintenance program. I want to briefly provide some background information, and then I'll talk about 3 key findings that we had. As has been discussed, the maintenance program is separate from the shop program. The maintenance program handles generally 2 types of work. As the representative from the LAO indicated, there's a major maintenance element. These are fairly large projects in comparison. It's work that's generally done by contractors. Also, the maintenance program deals with field maintenance, or the minor maintenance, which is done by Caltrans employees, generally speaking. That work generally includes fixing potholes, litter and debris pickup, maintaining lane striping, clearing vegetation, those sorts of things. At the request of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, we reviewed the maintenance program. Specifically, they asked us to look at allocations and spending decisions, how those decisions are made. We found in our review that many of the issues that we identified were related to the field maintenance side of the house. Specifically, one of the key things that we found was the maintenance division had developed some tools that seemed like a logical approach to assessing the maintenance needs, those field maintenance needs, and addressing them through a budget model that they had developed and then some other planning documents. This approach included taking all of the state's highways and dividing those highways into what were called zones. Zones were based on the climate and also the traffic volume that road handles. Once Caltrans had divided the state's roads into these zones, they then established a performance score or a service score for that zone. So a zone that's in the desert and has high traffic volume had a particular service score that they were intending to reach. They also set goals for improving those scores specific to that zone. The model would have established a set allocation for each of those zones. So essentially, it's grouping highways with similar maintenance needs and then allocating according to those needs. Lastly, Caltrans had developed some requirements for monitoring, creating and monitoring work plans. So kind of in summary, it's Caltrans is performing an assessment to identify the needs that exist. They were allocating funds based on those needs. They were establishing a work plan to then use those funds to address the needs. This seemed like a logical approach for informing where the needs exist and how best to prioritize those allocations. However, as we reviewed, we found that Caltrans didn't implement that approach, that instead they continued to use a higher level needs assessment approach at a district level rather than at that more granular, localized zone level. As we visited various districts, we visited 3 districts, Los Angeles, Oakland, and Fresno, 4, 6, and 7. As we talked to them, they told us that they actually don't use that information. They don't use that needs assessment information to guide or to plan their work. Our second key finding was related to the allocations that the maintenance division makes to the 12 districts. We found that those allocations were based on historical averages rather than on the service needs that exist in the districts or that zone level information. Despite reporting that it was using the more robust approach. In fact, we found that the allocations, each district's allocation remained essentially the same year to year, with small fluctuations of between 1% and 2%. Even though some of the districts had very low service scores consistently over the period that we looked at, 5-year period. In addition, the allocations, as we compared it to traffic volume, which is one of those key indicators of maintenance needs, we found that the allocations in traffic volume didn't align. Finally, and perhaps not surprisingly given the other 2 findings, we found that the actual spending that the districts were doing wasn't consistent with maintenance needs, the climate and traffic volumes. We were able to plot Caltrans field maintenance data on maps and do a comparison to see, based on the zones that exist, so based on the climate and traffic volume zones, did we see consistent spending? And we found numerous instances where spending was either significantly higher than average and significantly lower than average over that 5-year period, which really suggested us that Caltrans needed to reassess that allocation methodology and assess whether its allocations and its spending were appropriately addressing maintenance needs. One of our key recommendations was that the legislature include language in the Budget Act that require Caltrans to develop and implement a budget model that takes into consideration these performance service scores, that takes into consideration other indicators of need, such as traffic volume and climate. And we also recommended that Caltrans implement the more localized zone level assessment of maintenance need that we believe will help increase transparency, it increases accountability, and it will allow Caltrans to determine if its spending is resulting in the level of maintenance that's appropriate and necessary. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Okay. Level assessment, would that be broken down into the regions that they now have, or would you break it down smaller than the existing regions?
It could be broken down to the region level. It would essentially be taking the road itself and establishing a service score for that road and for roads similar to that road. So if Caltrans wanted to use the region level in terms of allocating the funding, certainly that would work as long as those service scores are being calculated for that route, that zone level.
And then how would that be translated into budget considerations within Caltrans? through the transportation plan? How would we do that? Through CTC and Caltrans, how would we get that translated into budget appropriation?
It's, at this point, the funding that's used for the field maintenance is, it's essentially discretionary funding. So at this point, it's not built into the 5-year maintenance plan specifically that's identifying for the major maintenance for that, the more significant highway maintenance. It's actually not built into that process. Certainly something that could be discussed, that those allocations are included in, but at this point, Caltrans has this discretionary funding, and it's using, currently it's using just historical averages to allocate the funding to the districts.
I'll have, the director can comment just in a second too then. And would there be any need for periodic auditing then of this whole process? Do you see a need for an independent audit?
At this point, I don't believe so. I think that's something certainly Caltrans would want to be assessing as time goes on, as they're allocating that funding. They'll be able to see, is Caltrans achieving those service scores? And as you have comparable zones in different parts of the state, they would be able to see if they were getting a different result in, for example, Southern California as compared to Northern California. So there certainly would be some opportunity to review and assess the results of their allocations.
To your knowledge, are there established performance scoring, or would we have to articulate some, come up with some?
At this point, there currently is. They have a process now for assessing maintenance need. They're essentially taking all of the lane miles in a district, and they're dividing them into 1-mile segments, and then randomly selecting 20% of those lane miles to go and assess, which generally is what we would be suggesting, and really that they suggested in the budget model. Only the budget model is rather than taking a random sample, it's suggesting that they stratify their selection. They select particular lane miles in particular zones so that they can speak more specifically to that type of road, to that specific asset. So they do exist at this point. We think that they're at a high level. It's at a district level. By taking it down to a zone level, it's going to provide useful information to supervisors and maintenance crews who are working on those roads to know what the condition is and what's the goal that we're trying to get them to.
Okay. Director Dockery, could you kind of walk us through what you've heard the auditor observe and see how where you're at compares to what he's suggesting and musing about?
Sure. Well, first, let me express my appreciation to the work that the auditor did, and I think that we're going to continue to work with them to address any of the outstanding concerns. Regarding the conversation about zone level, what you want to do is you want to get to a point where you're comparing like facilities to like facilities and what the maintenance needs may be. We do that when we're programming and looking at allocating our highway maintenance program. The highway maintenance program does use route-specific and zone-level methodology. That's the contract-out maintenance work that we do. We've also talked about the shop work that we do as far as prioritizing the needs throughout the state. On the field side of things, first of all, on the performance of the facilities, every year we publish a level of service statewide report. This is the executive summary I have in front of me for every category of maintenance family activity, whether or not it's roadside, landscape, litter, graffiti. I have LOS scores for every district by every family. And that gives us a target as to where we are above our targets or below our targets by district, and then we look at our allocations and take into consideration the condition of our facility. Allocating field resources is a science and it is an art. And I say that not only as the director, past chief deputy, past district director, but also as a past deputy district director for maintenance for the San Joaquin Valley in District 6. I've allocated resources out to maintenance staff. 40 to 50% of our work is reactionary. Things happen that day, there are accidents, there are emergencies, we get service requests, we have to go out and react. It doesn't mean we don't need to plan our work. We absolutely need to plan our work, but we need to plan our work around the fact that we're going to be a reactionary mode 40 to 50% of the time. When it comes to field maintenance, we did develop a model. That model was not giving us logical output. It was telling us to take resources out of major metropolitan areas where our greatest need is and put it in other smaller rural areas which we were having higher scores in LOS. Doesn't mean we don't need to go back and try to develop a better model, and we've committed to do that and working with the analyst's office to be able to do that. But that model was not giving us logical output, so we did not use that to allocate those resources. The only other thing that I think that I wanted to talk about was the traffic volumes. I do not discount the conversation about traffic volumes and taking that into consideration, but I will tell you this. The traffic volumes in Los Angeles and Orange County are probably very similar for very similar routes. I do not allocate resources to those two different areas at the same allocation per mile because the age of the system is completely different and the condition of the system is completely different between Orange County and Los Angeles. I also have to take into consideration that the volume of traffic that I have on 80 over the Sierras and I-5 going north out of California, I have to keep open during the winter. So I have to take all of these things into consideration. We use a very sophisticated asset management for our shop. We use zone-level route-specific allocation of our major maintenance. 50% of our field work is responsive. We are using the model that was referenced earlier on two criterias, guardrail and striping. After you get past that, we have to do an IT project to get any deeper into these categories, and we've committed to do that and develop that model for the top 10, but it's going to cover about 8% of our maintenance work. So I have to do a cost-benefit analysis. I'm going to spend a fair amount of resources to develop an IT project to be able to do that, and I'm committed to do that.
Okay. Senator Walk, we've just had a presentation of the auditor, and Director Doherty has just responded to that. Do you have any questions for him? No. I don't know what page it is in yours.
25. All right. We can certainly take public comment on this issue. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the commission on this, the committee on this issue? Come forward. All right. This item was informational only, I believe. All right. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Welcome, Chair. Glad you could join us. I'm Jeannie Wardwaller with the California Bicycle Coalition. I also am a member on the Caltrans Asset Management Plan Stakeholder Committee, which mostly consists of local agencies from around the state. I think I'm the one sort of nonprofit advocate that represents non-auto modes on that group, but that's been extremely enlightening to sort of understand the process of how Caltrans does allocate money to the shop and how they sort of decide where that funding goes. I think my particular interest is in how Caltrans is using those funds to implement their Complete Streets policy, which they've had since 2008, and which requires the department to design for all road users, including pedestrians and bicyclists, in all projects, including maintenance projects. And that, is certainly, as transportation dollars are limited, I think, maintenance projects going in and tearing up the road is a cost-effective opportunity to go in and stripe bike lanes or improve sidewalks and crossings and make sure that we really do have space for all users, particularly people who are not in their cars, since one of, the state goals and certainly Caltrans goals in their strategic management plan is to reduce vehicle miles traveled and promote those other modes. So we would certainly like to see that in the performance measures for the shop moving forward. And as the legislature feels the need to, sort of help to define those priorities, I think lifting up those specific things would be really helpful to the asset management plan process moving forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next, please, come forward.
Erica Rincon-Whitcomb with PolicyLink. Also want to second the previous comments that we would also be very supportive of allowing the asset management plan to really be more considerate of complete streets infrastructure, especially to the degree that that provides benefits to disadvantaged communities, and also for the consideration opportunity to really advance the types of projects that are really lifting up our national transportation objective that our Secretary Fox has really laid out around creating ladders to opportunity and through, recruiting, hiring, and training folks with barriers to employment and local hire on these projects. Thank you.
All right, welcome.
Good afternoon, Tony Dang with California Walks. I just wanted to say to commend Caltrans for embarking on this asset management process and really beginning to break out of the silo as it approaches maintenance. However, we do share the same concerns as our colleagues that just spoke around the missed opportunity of implementing complete streets during maintenance, because it really is a cost-effective opportunity. We'd also like to urge the legislature to support the LAO's recommendations around performance measures for the asset management process, and really to look at performance measures beyond the status of those assets, because I think at the end of the day, we're not looking to just achieve 100% maintenance, in good condition. We're looking to move people and goods in a safe, efficient, and sustainable manner. So it's really important for those performance measures to incorporate public health, social equity, and climate goals. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further comment? All right, we're going to continue with Caltrans through issue 2, 3, and 4. Issue 2, we can actually take some action on. All right, issue 2, continuation of the Transportation Bond Act administration. Mr. Doherty, are you on?
I am, Chair.
All
Thank
right,
you. Nice
go for
to see you. Caltrans is requesting to continue the administration of the department's responsibilities pursuant to the Proposition 1B program. The request represents a 5-year funding plan beginning in 2016-17 and extending through 2020-21, with an initial reduction of 3 positions in 16-17 and a total reduction of 16 positions by 2021. The resources will allow Caltrans to continue to successfully implement and administer the portions of Proposition 1B for which it is responsible. We've been having administrative support for Prop 1B from the outset in 2007, 2008, and lately the resources on an annual basis have been declining on an annual basis because of the reduction in that work and the concluding of that program. I would note that the bond program allowed for each bond program to spend as much as 2% authorized for administration. For us, that is estimated to be about 0.55%, less than 1% of administration costs in Proposition 1B. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on this item.
All right, any comments from the commissioners, from committee members? All right, LAO? Whoop. Hello.
Chair, Paul Jacobs from the LAO. So traditionally, the legislature has approved these positions for a period of 2 years, and this year the governor is requesting it for 5 years. And our office has found that there is considerable uncertainty related to staffing positions going out 5 years. These uncertainties could be from the timing of projects being completed. Another factor is when a project becomes completed, they don't really know the staffing for post-completion work until they've done audits and so forth. And that's kind of uncertainty we don't know yet. Additionally, if there are savings from projects, which we hope there will be, that money can be reinvested, and so Caltrans can find itself in a position of being understaffed, actually, if they have more projects that they want to complete. Rolled over into the next. Exactly, yes. So we recommend that these positions be approved for 2 years rather than the 5 years being requested.
All right, and I believe that is indeed the staff recommendation, and I agree with that their recommendation is to fund 39 positions in 16-17, 36 in 17-18 for the administration of Prop 1B, and reject the funding for the proposed positions for the years,
Make a motion.
the 3. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Discussion? Public comment? Seeing none. All right, let's take a vote.
Senator Wolk?
Aye?
Senator Nielsen? Aye. Senator Pavley?
All right, passes 3-0. All right, let's move on to issue number 3, which is increased funding for the UC Institute of Transportation Studies. To the LAO, please. Thank you.
Yes, so the UC Regents is requesting a funding augmentation of $9 million that will be rolled out and phased in over 3 years. This is for the Institute for Transportation Studies. This institute comprises UC Berkeley, UC Davis, UC Irvine, and UCLA. They provide research related to transportation in the state that contains things such as traffic congestion, air pollution, climate change, goods movement, disadvantaged communities, and so forth. Now, this money will be coming from the public transportation account, and committee staff has highlighted that there's going to be some trade-offs related to this proposal. On one hand, you're going to be getting better research provided to the department and to the state through this money, but on the other hand, because this money comes out of the PTA, it also could have an impact on the State Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP. The staff has highlighted that the STIP has recently taken reductions to its revenues due to decreasing gas taxes, and so those are the trade-offs the legislature has to consider. We have no recommendations on this item.
All right, thank you. Do you have any, let's see. All right, comment, let's see. Any comments from the commission?
No, I know you're holding it open.
Yes,
but,
we are.
Of course, I'd like to see the programs continue to be funded, but I would like to specifically know what we've accomplished by them to justify the expenditure continuing.
Yes, ITS, who's speaking for ITS?
I know there's always competing priorities, but if this is a worthwhile program, I just want to be able to know a little bit about it.
Yeah, I know a bit about this. We are holding this open, and there is a base of funding. There are 4 institutes, and they have provided, we need to have information from them. I have gotten some about, come forward, whoever's going to speak for ITS, some of the ways in which this research has been taken on by these institutes and has helped the state of California.
Not just sitting on the shelf.
No, exactly. That is really useful to the transportation system. So since we are holding it open, I'd like to hear a bit more about that, and then talk a little bit about what's being proposed. And I think one of the things it would be important to do is work with the Assembly Committee so that we come up with a common approach here. So why don't you tell us?
Thank you, Senator Wolk, and committee members for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Alex Bain. I'm a faculty at UC Berkeley, professor in the Electrical Engineering and Computer Science Department. I'm also the director of ITS Berkeley, one of the 4 branches of ITS, and faculty scientist at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. Today, I represent the 4 branches of ITS, which are Berkeley, Davis, Irvine, and UCLA, and we're working with assistance of the University of California Office of the President, which works system-wide. Very brief 30 seconds background on ITS. ITS was founded in 1947 by an act of state legislature with an initial budget around $900,000, has been modified with very minor adjustments since this time and with no inflator. However, in these many decades, the Institute has grown a lot. As was mentioned earlier, we have 4 missions at ITS, one of them which is research and providing activities on technology and engineering on behalf of the state. The second one is education, educating the workforce. The third one is tech transfer, to bring this technology to the state. And finally, we have one of the most prominent libraries in transportation in the nation to serve California with various missions. Our goal is to address the state's priority related to the field of transportation and mobility. We, of course, work a lot with Caltrans. We've heard a lot from Director Dougherty earlier today, but we also work with a lot of other agencies, in particular the California Energy Commission, ARB, and many others. So over the last year, we've been working with various members here in the Sacramento community, in the Assembly and the Senate, specific for this budget change proposal from the public transportation account to through the UC Office of the President. The goal of this BCP would be to establish an organization that can be more responsive to the state's needs in the field of transportation and partner with the state and with various agencies on these high-level priorities. I think several outcomes that will come out of these BCP is the notion that we will bring a lot more federal funding to California, in particular from the US DOT, but from many other departments in Washington, as as well as private funds that can also come to California to create more jobs here. Secondly, I think it would be very important for us because we really want to be responsive to California's need, and right now we could benefit from a much stronger organization to do that. And finally, to also work to build a workforce for California that is more aligned with California's strategic interest. Right now, because a lot of the funding we're dealing with is soft money, we are responsive to everybody's needs, which is, of course, at the federal level, but also other states, and we want to really focus on California. Finally, I'd like to read from the briefing you've been given 3 lines which really summarize best the goal here. So I'm just going to read from your briefing. According to the UC, this request provides funding sufficient to establish permanent, ongoing programmatic infrastructure that will allow ITS to respond to state policymakers' requests for ad hoc guidance and to engage actively with California's government at all levels. So with this kind of short introduction and background, I would be very happy to answer any questions you have on this topic. Thank you.